this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin. Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. Arguably one of my favorite Hollywood folks, and he's still alive. Matter of fact, a World War II hero, if you didn't know that, is Mel Brooks. I think he is an absolute comic genius. And can you imagine having created two movies as well as a Broadway smash under the same title, The Producers? Arguably both iterations. I never saw the Broadway play, but both iterations of the movies. One with Zero Mostel and the other with Gene Wilder. The second one with Nathan Lane, and of course Ferris Bueller. Both hilarious. But you know, there's a quote in there, famously in the where Matthew Broderick is talking to Nathan Lane in the second, and he wants to put on a hat because there is a hat that producers symbolically wear. And he says, no, you can't put the hat on until the play actually runs. Then you're truly a producer. Well, we're going to talk about a producer today. A producer in Hollywood that has now been found guilty in the deaths of not one young woman, but two. And I got to tell you, when you look back over time, you could see things headed down the track that were very ominous about this individual. Today, we're going to talk about two young ladies that died at the hand of a man assisted by, allegedly, his friends. And the murder weapon? Drugs. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Today on Body Bags, what we're covering is just an absolutely heartbreaking tragedy of two very young women whose lives ended in, I don't know how else to say it, in the gutter. It's the way it comes down to, where if you can imagine.
Well, hold a minute.
Where it happens, where you're literally, your life ends on an emergency room ramp after you're done.
Right. That's the best way to put it, Joe. Because Christy Giles, a native of Alabama, actually grew up not far from where Joe Scott Morgan and I live.
Yeah.
Is out with her friend Hilda Cabrales Arzola, and I'm not really sure about the pronunciation. I apologize.
That's good. You did good.
I said it fast enough. All right, so Christy and Hilda are going out on a girls' night. Now, let's back up very quickly here.
Yeah.
It's a girls' night out. Christy and Hilda are friends. They have two other friends that go out with them as well. So 4 girls, young women, go out for the night. Christy is married. Her husband is in San Francisco visiting his father. So Christy and her friends, they go out. Now, stage is set. They're going out for girls' night. You know, girls' nights happen every night of the week somewhere in America.
Yeah.
And rarely do they end up like this one. They did not set out to pick up men. That was not the goal. The goal was to be girls' night. Have fun, dance, go home.
Yeah.
The reason we're doing the story is because Christy and Hilda never made it back home. They started their night smiling and ended the night being dumped at 2 different hospitals on the street. by masked men who had taken license plates off their cars, took these women out, dumped their bodies, and took off. That's why we're talking about the deaths of Christy and Hilda. And that's why they're on body bags. So beginning to end, all I'm thinking, Joe, for any parent, this is the nightmare. This is the thing we, especially with our girl children.
Yes.
We warn them that life is filled with, I want to say it the nicest way I can, but evil is everywhere, and evil is looking for you. And if you're not aware, evil will get you.
Well, let me tell you
bringing lambs to the slaughter.
Yeah. The devil never shows up with a pointy tail and pitchfork. Devil always shows up with a beautiful smile.
Oh, buddy.
And that's, that's kind of what I think that's what happened. Let me tell you a quick side note here. Both of these young women were, as you had mentioned, they were dumped at two separate hospitals. I don't know that I have encountered this before. I think that timing is an issue here, obviously, relative to the status that these two individuals may have been in. And one is not technically dumped on the ramp, but just let me give you a real insight into this. When I came to work at the medical examiner's office in Atlanta, and I always found this kind of ironic, Grady Hospital in downtown Atlanta is this huge, huge public hospital that takes all comers, that treats everybody. Okay. And they had a massive ramp. And if you've never been to one of these big city hospitals that services multiple counties and a massive population, their ambulance ramp, it looks like a football field in length, if you can imagine that. Because if you live in a small community, you might only have like one or two slots where an ambulance will back in and they'll offload patients. Dude, this looks, I don't know how to describe it other than pulling up at an airport where you're having to let people off at the curb. And each thing is sectioned off. So we would have these cases. The medical examiner was literally at the end of the road leading away from the emergency ramp. When I went to examine bodies in the emergency room where they would call me and notify me of gunshot wounds, all these sorts of things, literally I would grab my scene bag. I would walk up the sidewalk, probably only about 60 yards, and I was standing on the ramp. So, and ramps are something else at hospitals like this. I've been out there. I've literally seen blood spots, and not just like droplets, but multiple like puddles of blood in each one of the little intake areas there, and it just comes fast and furious. If you have a car, and this does happen, that just drives up, and they will open up the back door many times. They'll have somebody passed out either from drug, or I've had gunshot wounds, stab wounds, and they will literally just push the person out of the back of the car, peel off, and they're gone. And Dave, tell me, what was it that you said about license plates in this particular case?
In both situations with both girls, as I mentioned, they were dropped off at different times at different hospitals. But the people who dropped them off, because it was more than one, they were masked, wearing masks, and the car had been prepped in such a way that they removed the license plates, plural, so they could not be seen on surveillance video. California is a state that requires plates in front and back, and those had been removed. So they pull in. Can't tell the license plate on the car. You can just tell that it's a Nissan, that it's a Prius. And these masked men pull the bodies out of the car and lay them right there and take off. Just leave them laying there, Joe, and take off.
Well, the interesting thing about it, Dave, you had mentioned that mask and the removal of plates, that goes to planning, doesn't it?
Big time planning. And by the way, I mentioned there was time in between.
Yeah.
It wasn't 15 minutes. It was hours. So in the case of Christy, She was DOA. She was dead when they went to work on her at the pavement when medical people got to her.
Right.
Hilda, on the other hand, was dropped off several hours later. I think it was 3.5, 4 hours later.
Right, it was.
She's dropped off at a different hospital, and actually one of the masked men said, "Hey, we're just good Samaritans. We found her and dropped her off." They told that to a security guy. The bottom line, Joe, always being the bottom line, they were dropped off by the same people. Their car had been disguised so as not to be able to identify it by a license plate anyway. They're wearing masks, and yet there are two women. One is dead, the other is dying. And that's how they treated them. Just like trash on the curb.
Yeah, tossing them out. And here's the thing. When you begin to think about some of my favorite people in the world, those that work in emergency rooms, nursing aides, RNs, LPNs, and of course, emergency room physicians, they're heroes. And the thing about it is that one of the reasons they're heroes is that sometimes when you step out beyond those sliding doors and they're screaming that we've got somebody down and they are in arrest, you never know what you're going to find, and you have no family around to provide a history. It's when science kicks in and you begin to try to unravel this mystery of what not only brought this person here, but what brought them to their end.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
You know, unlike beatings, stabbings, and of course, shootings, or even asphyxiations, when you have this unseen modality or methodology, more accurately, of death, when you're talking about OD, any kind of poisons, it really leaves the medical community scratching their collective heads, because you have no idea what has brought seemingly healthy people not just to their knees physically, but to their end. It's something that it's worst case scenario, Dave, for people, first responders, and people in the emergency room to try to understand what's brought, because you have to try to discern to the point where you can understand a treatment path for this, because you want to save their lives. I mean, can you imagine standing over, and I'm thinking about Miss Giles right now, if standing over this young, beautiful woman who appears to be in the bloom of youth, and she has apparently no obvious injuries like this, but yet she's not breathing and she's unresponsive, and essentially she's probably cool to the touch at this point in time. It's a kind of a helpless, hopeless feeling, but you know, that's what our medical professionals sign on to, and they do a great job most of the time.
You know, as we were looking at this case, Joe, we knew the ending because that was what got the headline. I mean, anytime you have a story that begins with a beautiful young woman is dumped outside the hospital by two masked men with license plates removed from their vehicle, that's going to get the attention of the press. You do it twice in the same day, hours apart from one another, you're going to connect the dots and go, well, I guess these two are connected somehow. That's where the investigation begins.
Yeah.
So Christy Giles is 24-year-old, married. Her husband is in the entertainment industry. He's a visual effects supervisor, and he has gone to visit his dad for a couple of days. His wife, Christy, is considerably younger than he is at 20. He's in his 40s. She's, 24. Her friend Hilda is 26. And as I mentioned earlier, they go out with two other friends, but the two other friends bail at some point during the night. Now, look, Christy and Hilda, beautiful, young, girls' night out. You're going to go out and dance and have drinks. This is not an uncommon thing in any city in America, and that's all they were doing, Joe. Now, as the night went on, they ended up going to, and when I say a warehouse club thing, that is not uncommon in LA. I don't know how it is in other areas, but the Los Angeles warehouse party scene has been going on since I was college age that I know of, and I'm sure it was before then.
Yeah.
These are parties that just kind of spring up and are held at different areas. They're not disorganized, but they're organized to be all-night rave type things. And the young women went to that. They meet a couple of people while they're there. And not in a romantic sense for the girls, just dancing, partying, let's keep the party going on. So they went back to the apartment of one of the men, but there were a couple of men involved. And they go back to the apartment, and it's around 5:30 in the morning when both girls are feeling not right. Something good is not happening here. And a text message is exchanged between Christy and Hilda. And the essence is, this is getting weird. Let's get out of here. Calling Uber. Be here in 10 minutes.
And here's the kind of chilling thing about this is that the Uber is seen pulling up outside of the apartment and leaving empty. Now, let that sink in just for a second. So in that period of time, from the moment that these women, their spidey senses are going off, and you can imagine if they have been plied with a substance like this, they already know that they're vulnerable. The only thing they want to do is try to make it to the Uber. It's almost like that Uber is a life raft that has shown up, and you have no strength left in your arms and your legs to kick, to get out to it and pull yourself up into it. And I have to tell you, Dave, even if they had made it into the Uber, there's a high probability, I think, that they could have both have simultaneously died in the backseat of that Uber. But the Uber is seen leaving that location, and it's empty. It's devoid of these two women that are in distress.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
We hear about drug deaths every day. Dave, you and I have covered, I can't tell you how many on body bags. But, the thing about it is, it's one thing to have a death as a death investigator where you're talking about like a straight up cocaine overdose, which is going to wind up, impacting the heart and the brain in an acute, kind of manner. Then you might have heroin that causes an individual to go into respiratory failure. But when you begin to think about so-called drug cocktails, which is something, I'm not saying it's new under the sun. We can go back to Belushi and even before then, where he was doing essentially hot shots, a combination of heroin and coke, speedballs. Yeah. And, you have it going back, but it's now even, I don't know if I can say it's necessarily more insidious now, but there's so much that's out there. There's so much synthetic stuff that's out there. But just kind of let me break this down for you real quick. When, when Christy was taken to the Los Angeles County coroner medical examiner's office, she was essentially, when they did the blood draw on her and they ran that through tox, they found a broad spectrum of drugs in her system. And I'm glad that you asked me the question, though, about what could they have ingested, say, in life, and then been plied with afterwards that would have been literally a recipe for disaster. With Christy, she's diagnosed with multiple drug intoxication. Now, just let me run down to you what she had in her system. Okay, she's got cocaine. She's got fentanyl. Now, the thing about it is that coke and fentanyl, sometimes, dealers are mixing in fentanyl with coke. There are people that do overdose on straight up fentanyl. They can be plied with fentanyl, but many times it's a mixture of cocaine and fentanyl, almost like it's not necessarily like to cut the drug, but it enhances it, according to dealers. She had ketamine on board, which is, has a history of, it's a veterinarian sedative or anesthetic, and it's misused all of the time. It's incredibly powerful and it's very lethal. And on top of that, she also had gamma hydroxybutyrate, which is GHB. And of course, we all know GHB is a rape drug. Okay, so let's kind of break this down. If you're going out and you're going to a party, it's possible that you, in fact, an individual, in fact, that would want to get into the mood for partying and be able to sustainability, that you're just going to go at it, you're going to dance, hang out, that sort of thing. Coke would probably be the drug of choice, perhaps. You could have that indwelling in your system prior to. Now, it's a real trick to try to measure how the drug is metabolized. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about the speed at which the drug is broken down in the system. And we're talking about a death that occurred so very quickly following. And when I say real quickly, we're talking about a very short window here of time, a couple of hours. Was cocaine taken earlier, or was it in part of the mix to be able to take advantage of her? My suspicion is, and I would say that perhaps cocaine and fentanyl were something that were introduced early on in the evening, probably along with alcohol, which we can't forget about that, because that's also has a certain level of lethality with it. Then in order to get control, an individual would say, okay, well, what can I do? Well, if you just the GHB alone, and how many cases have we covered, Dave, involving GHB that just wind up tragic in so many of these cases? I know that Nancy covers them regularly.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Involving rape and that sort of thing, because it is, quote unquote, the date rape drug. And it has because it has an anesthetic quality to it, it also dulls your memory. You don't really remember what happened afterwards.
Does it stay in your system for a very long time, or does it go out quick?
And again, you have to understand this. Everybody has to understand this. When we're talking about staying in the system, you have individuals that can take it, and they'll wake up. There will still be a residual amount in their system, but the further down range you go in time, that drug is eventually metabolized out of the system, and you might not have any way to source it, to say, in fact, I did have GHB on board.
We're talking hours, days.
Yeah, it would be a matter of, don't pin me down on this, but I would imagine it's probably going to be out of the system within probably at top end 72 hours. I don't know you would see it that much afterwards.
Wow.
It's odorless, it's tasteless, it's a clear liquid, and it hits you like a 10-pound sledgehammer.
Wow.
Because, there's any number of videos of people that have been plied with this stuff from bars, and you can see them just kind of, they get into this almost like childlike state. And that's one of the things that will happen with predators in bars with GHB, is that they will say, "Oh, I'll take care of them," and they'll guide them out. And the next thing you know, they're led back to their lair, essentially.
That explains so much.
And so, kind of what happened. Did the perpetrator ply them? Let's have another beer. Let's have another cocktail. And the GHB, which is odorless and tasteless, is mixed in at this point in time. And you don't know what has occurred. That's what makes the Uber thing so tragic. Because by that point in time, you very well might have two individuals that are so disoriented. And Christy in particular, because when she was dropped at the ER, she was flatlined at that point in time. She was already deceased. So it's kind of trying to understand what happened. And I'll go ahead and kind of bury the lead on this and say that, this case has wound up where it's been adjudicated. We're talking about it right now. And the individual was charged with manslaughter in this particular case. Well, that implies that the individual did not go out with specific intent to commit a first-degree homicide. This drug or drugs were not applied to her in order to say, I'm going to kill her. This is something that happened as a result of criminal behavior, obviously, but there was not necessarily intent to take their life. There was intent to commit a sexual assault. So it's kind of hard in the it's very hard in the medical legal world to try to understand at what point in time the drugs were administered. Now, when you take a look at Hilda, her drug cocktail, if you will, just give me a little bit of rope there. Her drug cocktail is essentially a little bit different, because you've got her where she is diagnosed with what's referred to as multiple organ failure. Many times what you will have with an individual where they say multiple organ failure is you'll have somebody that is, say, on the unit, like if they're in a comatose state, they might make it out of the emergency room, they're placed on ICU, and they have to be on a vent. Their system essentially gives up. And it's very tragic, because you will see each organ system kind of systematically shut down, everything from the kidneys to the liver, obviously the respiratory system with, the lungs, the brain, the heart. And that's what we're talking about. And they diagnosed her with multiple drug intoxication. And her cocktail is a little bit different, because she tested positive, Dave, for cocaine. And in addition to her having cocaine on board, just like Christy did, Dave, she had MDMA on board. Guess what that is? Well, that's ecstasy. And ecstasy is commonly regarded as a party drug. It's a synthetic drug that, hit the streets back in the 80s.
Can you overdose on that?
You can. Yeah, you can. Most of the time it's going to make its way out of your system, but you do have deaths related, particularly if you're talking about drug combos, which we're talking about now. We know cocaine is there. You've got ecstasy on board as well, but there were signs that there were other drugs in her system, but yet they were undetermined. Okay. And we come back to metabolism, right? Well, if she survives long enough in the hospital, which in fact she did, because we're talking, Hilda, tragically, she didn't die for multiple days. This event, just so that we're oriented on here, the initial event takes place on November the 13th. Well, Christy dies on the, approximating the 13th into the early morning hours. And, we've got Hilda, though, that Dave, she hangs on till November 24th. Okay. So a lot of the stuff that she may have had in her system is now, has made its way out. And I don't know, the big difference here for hospitals is that if you've got some of these more exotic drugs on board, let's say like a GHB, they're not necessarily in their initial drug panel. When they're drawing drugs on somebody that's alive and they're trying to treat them, GHB is not necessarily going to be on the spectrum. It may or may not be, dependent upon what the hospital asked for, what the doctor asked for. Now, cocaine's going to pop up pretty quickly. They've obviously gotten a hit on MDMA, again, ecstasy, so they know that they're dealing with that. But you don't know what else was in the system. So it becomes, at that point, an opinion that's rendered by the forensic pathologist when they look at the medical records and the treatment progression, because we're talking days here. We're talking, 11 days essentially under care of a physician. They begin to watch the organs collapse and no longer function. She's on a vent. They've got her on ICU. And she's never going to regain consciousness. So you're sitting back and you're literally watching a plane crash that you can do nothing about. And this young lady eventually dies. And so when that happens, you don't know, you don't really, it impedes your ability to treat, and to determine a course of treatment because it's so overwhelming, the drugs that they would in fact have on board, Dave.
It just breaks my heart, Joe, to see two young women, vibrant, early in life, and they just went out to have fun together. That's all they did. And they ran afoul of a man who calls himself a producer, David Pierce. There is, I don't want to, you and I both do not like the idea of closure and things like that, saying such a word to somebody who has gone through something that is so emotionally just, you don't get over it. But there has been some justice meted out. David Pierce was charged, as were some of the other men. And this has come down the pike in the last week, that David Pierce was convicted, of 2 charges of first-degree murder. He actually, I want to make sure I get this straight because there were other charges that came down. To back up very quickly.
Manslaughter. I think it's
no,
manslaughter.
Actually, it was first. This is from the L.A. County. I thought that too, but I went to the DA, the L.A. County government site.
Oh God!
And
you
it
need
says
to strike everything I said.
The jury found David Pierce guilty of all charges and allegations, 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Christy Giles and Hilda. When this case first broke, Joe, of the 2 women being dumped at hospitals by men wearing masks and license plates removed from the car, other women said, hey, that happened to me at the same place, this guy. So when these stories broke, all of this came out. And Pierce has been convicted 3 counts of forcible rape, 1 count of sexual penetration by use of force, 1 count of sodomy by use of force, 1 count of rape of an unconscious woman, and 1 count of sexual penetration by foreign object in the sexual assaults of 7 different victims. There might be more later on.
Well, I think, am I correct in that these other cases date back all the way to 2010, don't they?
2007?
2007.
Yes.
Well,
they went back further. It's amazing how long this guy's been doing this, Joe.
Well, going back to what we talked about earlier with the dumpings that had taken place. God, I hate to say that. That's so horrible, Dave.
It is. It's so horrible to even say it. He did it.
You have to think, what did we say early on? We were talking about how this goes to planning. Well, it goes to planning in the sense that they're wearing masks. They're taking both the front and the rear plate off of a car. And it really gives you an idea that these individuals, and Pierce in particular, has a methodology to this madness where he knows how this works. And again, the idea of being a producer, the producer part of this is such an enticement to people that are interested in being in entertainment that it's bait. I mean, it's absolutely positively bait that can be utilized in order to draw an individual in. Here's another thing that was kind of a slam dunk with this. Pierce's DNA was also found. There was DNA deposition that was found on these young women as well. That is a stone cold tieback, relative to this, and it's. I don't know that anything in this whole world is an absolute slam dunk when it comes to criminal charges, but in this particular case, I do know this. There is a individual who I would term as a super predator that is now off the streets of Los Angeles, California. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.